You learn a lot more about people through a conversation. You can hear, their tones, their underlying emotions, if they get really excited about things, asking recruits about what moments or experiences they're most proud of, and seeing where they take the conversation. I really enjoyed that aspect of recruiting because, at the end of the day, all of us college coaches, we're all going to go after the top kids, right? We're all going to go after the fastest ergs that we think could, influence our program. But what I need to do as a coach is find the athletes that I want to work with that I think I can support. Right. And I think as the recruit on the other side, right, my advice to them is, you're going to talk to a bunch of coaches, right? And we're all going to be able to offer you coaching in a boat, but it's going to come down to who do you feel like can help you achieve your goals for your college career.
You're all set. You're good.
Great. We're good. Let's roll.
Cool. All right. Well, we'll jump in. So for everyone listening, I have Coach Katie Lane from Drexel University for the women's program at Drexel. And I'm really excited to have Katie here. We're actually going to jump right in. I know you're in the middle of race week. You have your first race coming up this upcoming weekend. The show will probably come out, after that first race, but you have Navy Day coming up this weekend. And for everyone listening, I'm really excited to talk to Katie. Katie, I've been in Philadelphia my entire life. My entire rowing career is in Philadelphia. I know she has a lot of experience here in Philly, but also more notably here at Drexel in what is your second fall, I believe, at the lead, leading the program. We're going to dive into that. But you also have a very knowledgeable background, very experienced background in all things college rowing and rowing as a whole that I really want to dive into. But we'll keep the focus primarily on, at least here to start, what you have going on at Drexel, and then talking a little bit about college rowing, the recruiting process, so on and so forth. But without further ado, Katie, why don't we get started? Why don't you share a little bit about yourself, give us a little bit of an introduction, and then I promise my first question to you, because of a coach that we both know prior, Coach Leslie Mitchell, who was on a couple weeks ago. My first question to you is similar to my first question that I asked her during that episode, where I told her to essentially brag to me about rowing in Boston. Sell me on rowing in Boston. I'm going to ask the same for you. Sell me on rowing in Philadelphia, because I always look at the two of those as the two kind of most vibrant rowing communities around or in the country, like Philadelphia, Boston, Philadelphia. I'm biased towards one, as you can probably guess. I'm a Philadelphia person, but for you wake up to that skyline every morning and do your work out there. Talk to the audience about rowing in Philadelphia, not even just Drexel, but the Philadelphia rowing community.
Cool. Well, thanks, Kevin. I'm certainly glad to be here. I'll give you a little bit of background on me and who I am. I'm about 10 to 12 years as a full-time coach now in the sport. I was a walk-on athlete in college. And since I found rowing, I really just haven't stopped. I found ways to learn more about it by sitting in different seats, working in different aspects of the sport. I've been very fortunate to see the sport from just about every angle. In addition to coaching, I've worked with boat manufacturers. I've worked more recently with Hudson Boat Works. I've volunteered with U.S. Rowing in multiple facets over the years. Certainly most recently taking a little bit more of a commentator stance, so behind the mic like yourself. But I've been fortunate enough to work with masters rowers, men's rowers, women's rowers, all to really enhance what I think the sport can be and what the sport can do for character development. As a walk-on athlete, I really sought out the opportunity to continue my athleticism in college. Certainly I rowed at a small club program. Shout out to the University of Vermont Catamounts. And from there, I just made it a point to learn as much about the sport as I could, so I could be able to give back. So that included stints at the Institute for Rowing Leadership in Boston. I've got my master's in marketing intelligence, which I certainly didn't mind it's not that I didn't mind it. Let's just say that I was more so interested on this consumer psychology and how I could get that to parallel to recruiting versus, writing code about trying to understand survey data. But where that's taking me now is that I'm always in a position where I'm eager to learn. And I think where my medium has become, instead of in the classroom, it's really sitting down with people. So people that have a story to tell, certainly like yourself, about all the people that you brought on here, people that have had significant rowing experiences, whether it's, coming in at the Olympics or whether it's just people that rowing has had a big impact on their life. So I think for me, having the chance to sit down with you and sit down with other people to learn how rowing has influenced and how rowing can impact others is pretty exciting. So that's a little bit about me. But if I were to sell you on rowing in Philadelphia, man, it's both a tough one and an easy one. I think the easiest thing to say is that to be in a city where the general population recognizes what rowing is really special. When you search top 10 things to do in Philadelphia, the fact that Boathouse Row lights up as, in those top 10 general lists, like you can't beat that, for us and for you as well, right? It's a little bit of free advertising to say of like, oh, the couple boathouses in from the right side, that's where I work. I think that speaks for itself. Certainly the Schuylkill provides a lot of opportunity to see different rowing from all levels, from masters, from juniors to national team training hopefuls. It really just sets the tone for a really awesome environment to continue to train. The fact that the Schuylkill only allows motorized boat traffics for coaching launches, so we're not dealing with the power boats or the private boats in Boston and leading out to the big harbor that you would see even in New York City of the Circle Line ferry, which I've dealt with many years. The fact that rowing is so centralized and so concentrated in Philadelphia with being a part of the city, I think that's really what sells me.
No, that's a great answer. And I think, or just a great perspective where it's like, hey, like we're integrated with the community. We're integrated. We're a major city, but also rowing is at the as a centerpiece to the being that is Philadelphia, right? Like Philadelphia itself. So very cool, very cool. And with that, so I know that racing season is coming up, and now we're going to turn our attention to, right, we'll give Boston some love here as well, because I know you're traveling up that way for Heather Charles in a couple weeks. So when this comes out, it'll probably be the week of anyway. But tell me a little bit about where you guys are in the season. You have Navy Day coming up, a hometown race on the Schuylkill. How's the season been, and what has been maybe a little bit different from your first year leading the Drexel women to now entering your second fall with a busy racing season on the horizon?
Absolutely. I think the first year out of any head coach change, it's a lot of listening, right? You're learning what the program stands for, like what the routines are. You're learning about the athletes and how you can support them. So I think my biggest difference from year one to year two is, I came in year one and I listened. I got to know the athletes. I got to know the program. I got to know the alumni. I got to understand what it meant to be a Drexel Dragon. And I think in my second year, I was able to, certainly carry my excitement that I saw with the program and what I learned both from Director of Rowing, Coach Paul Savell, from the athletes, especially the seniors that just graduated. I was able to take that excitement and welcome 14 new people onto the squad. And I think for me in my second year, like recruiting is a big focus. And so the fact that we were to bring so many different faces, whether it's just transfers from other institutions that found their way back to Philadelphia or first year rowers that are interested in furthering their careers, I'm really excited about this new generation coming in. I think that they're able to kind of see who has come before them and not only fill their shoes, but continue on the path that they were on. So with the squad that we have, we've got a women's champ four headed to Boston in just about 2 weeks. So we're still at this point, right, where we are upon recording, we're still in the midst of selection and trying to understand that. But I think there's been some really courageous efforts right now coming out of the senior class, as well as the freshman class, like looking to make their mark. So we'll put that to the test this weekend at Navy Day. And we'll round out the rest of the season with 2 other more so local races. We'll do Navy Day, head of the Charles, followed by the head of the Schuylkill, and Princeton Chase. So I think one of the biggest draws for me, being a little bit later in my coaching career, I really value not being able or not loading the trailer every weekend, and having the hometown advantage of just knowing that we can stick to a lot of our routines that we practice day in and day out, and still throw down a pretty competitive piece.
And what would you say for you, like, okay, so you're in the fall, and right, racing season coming up, right? Racing pretty much every weekend, it sounds like, and then obviously wrapping things up with the Princeton Chase. Like, what do you as a coach, and what are you communicating with your staff, with your team, the older athletes, the younger athletes? Like, what is the main focus of, in your eyes, for the fall? Because I feel like it's different for a lot of teams. It's different from college level to high school level to masters and so on and so forth. But like, as a college coach, as a Division I college coach, like, what's the intent? What are you trying to get out of the fall season as you look back from, say, December, and what you were able to accomplish over the months leading up to, winter break and so on and so forth? What's the primary focus of the fall season for you guys?
Good question. I think the primary focus for us is just understanding each other where we're at. Drexel is unique that our season really didn't start until September 19th, where we're 3 weeks later on average than the people that we see both in and out of conference and those just around us here on Boathouse Row. So I think for us, it does require a lot of attention to detail and a lot of intention to what we're doing. I think my biggest focus that I'm trying to communicate to the athletes right now is, great, this is the stroke that we're looking to do. Like, let's take steps to get 1% better each day to be able to take this and not only grow this, but really excel in it come spring. So it's not that we're washing out the fall by any means, but I think we're just taking, it's almost like a slow approach, but a slow approach in a short amount of time to be able to understand what our basic mechanics are. I think from a team cohesion perspective and like a character development aspect, we're talking a lot about, we, not me. And to me, we, not me means that it's not that we're necessarily putting the team above ourselves, but we've got to recognize that there's a time to be selfish and there's a time to be selfless. I think when it comes to being selfless, you want to be able to take your own immediate needs and your own immediate focuses off, right? Say that you want to be competitive with the boat next door. You've got to put your focus in the boat that you're in, right? You can't beat out that other boat. You've got to work with your team. And there's certainly a time and a place to be selfish, right? When we do erg tests, right? I want that to be a very selfish pursuit, because that is very much based on your own approach, your own execution. But when it comes to the boat, being selfless enough that you can still work on your own technique, you can still work on your own stuff, but doing so in a way that supports the rhythm of the boat. So I think for us, it's really working on the basic mechanics this fall and understanding that difference of, when is it an appropriate time to be selfish and when is an appropriate time to be selfless. And when you add about a quarter of the team, so, adding 14 people to the roster, for some people, that's going to take a little bit of time. And I know that my approach is going to be different, especially if you've been with a high school program for a couple of years. It's just really getting to know the coach, and I want to be able to invite them into this process so they feel invested and that they're proud of what they're able to do.
Yeah, no, I think and every team's got, their own focus for the fall. And I think what makes you guys unique, and we'll talk about this, maybe, as we get into more about recruiting and even Drexel specifically, but you got Drexel, what I've always admired, or also like just what makes it very different, is the co-op program. And the fact that you guys literally started school 3 or 4 weeks later than everyone else, which means your season is essentially starting 3 or 4 weeks later, right? And now you're being thrusted into the fall season, and it's like, okay, well, we just started school, and good and bad because of the the intent that you probably put into the fall, where it's like, hey, like, our focus is on the spring. But it's just interesting because that is a unique part of Drexel, which I do want to dive into here, in further into the podcast, because I do think the co-op program, what you guys have to offer there, is unique because of the alternatives that it provides the student experience. But before we get to that, because again, we got a lot of topics that I really am interested in talking to you about. But one of the things that I think is interesting, especially for a team in Philadelphia, and kind of coming back to what we talked about before regarding Philadelphia, the vibrant community, rowing community, where rowing is not the big piece of Philadelphia, but a bigger piece relative to probably other cities out there. And as we look into recruiting and finding those athletes, as you begin to create your own culture, as you begin to really, establish your roots in the Drexel program and what you're trying to build for long-term success, you obviously have at your disposal a very large rowing population in the high school community in Philadelphia. But then obviously, I'm sure with Drexel, you are seeking athletes who are in other areas of the country and so on and so forth to
Mm-hmm.
build this class. Like, talk to me a little bit about your, because you said that this was a primary focus for you as you enter your second season. Like, talk to me a little bit
Mm-hmm.
about the recruiting process for you as coaches. What does that look like for you guys? What does it look like to bring in a class of 14 athletes, whatever you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
prior? Where does that begin? What does that look like? And maybe shed some light on that process as you enter the second fall season. All right, what's up, everyone? Kevin Leslie, and quick interruption to the podcast to tell you about the At the Thousand Collective. The ATT Collective is an online community for high school rowers who want to better position themselves for long-term success at the college level. And in the collective, you're going to be invited to 2 group coaching Zooms per month featuring top coaches, elite athletes, rowing experts, where we're going to dive into topics centered around training, rowing performance, college recruiting, personal development, you name it. You're also going to get an opportunity for a live Q&A where you can ask individual questions to help set you on your own path. You're also going to receive a weekly newsletter with erg workouts, core circuits, tips and tricks for rowing and recruiting, and also highlights from any previous Zooms so that you can begin to incorporate those into your own practice. Lastly, you're going to get unlimited access to all ATT online courses and programs, most notably the erg First, Row Second online course, where you can begin to do some training at your own pace. So the purpose of this program is to help athletes get the information and guidance to help them take that next step and feel prepared heading into college rowing. So if you're interested in joining, we're offering 50% off your first month. Go to the description below, grab the code, and we hope to see you in the next Zoom. And you'll also receive your first newsletter as soon as this upcoming week. So again, join the community. Let's have some fun. Let's keep pushing and evolving our rowing. And I hope to see you soon. Now back to the show. Peace.
I mean, I think it goes back to what I was saying a little bit earlier of my primary passion is to learn, right? And I want to learn from people. So a lot of my recruiting starts, talking to junior coaches and talking to, friends that I have at that level of, who's doing a good job. And it starts with a very simple conversation. To me, I could certainly go on resources like NCSA, right? And I can go put in my parameters of what I'm looking for, but the ones that really mean more to me, and the ones that are a little bit more personal are the coaches' recommendations that I can receive, right? So it comes down to, if I can have a conversation with a coach, right? If I call them up and say, hey, Joe Schmo, right? How are things going? Congrats on, whatever that past season was, or maybe it's after, a fall race or whatever it is. But, talking to him about what they're focusing in on the team, my question is, who do you have that's doing a good job? It's not who do I think would fit us. I just want to know who's doing a good job, right? And I want to hear how the coach talks about their experience with the athlete, right? Certainly there's some where, I'll go and I'll have names that I'll kind of run by and just say, hey, I found this person, or, you had mentioned this person before. And I want to wait to hear what their experience is. Sometimes they fall off the wagon. Sometimes, they've already committed other places, but it really starts for me at the very basic level of who's doing a good job. And from there, I'll hear the coach. They'll tell me kind of what I need to know about them as a person. And then I have an idea of, how I want to approach that conversation. So if it starts with that conversation, say the coach recommends, these 3 athletes, I get their names, I'm more of a texter per se, just by my preferred medium. But I'll reach out and I'll say, hey, I hear blank, blank, blank that, you're doing a great job. I'd love to jump on the phone and learn more. Let me know when a good time to call is. Because I want to be able to show the recruit that I'm the one interested, right? I don't want to say and leave it very open-ended and just say, do you want to get on a call? I'm pretty direct in my communication. Let me know when a good time to call is. I leave the ball in their court. I think when that type of relationship starts and I can be pretty direct up front, there's not really any room for error, right? I'm not trying to sift through all the noise and trying to do that. Great, I want to be able to get them on the phone so I can have as close to a genuine conversation as I can. I think things can get lost in emails and things can get lost in text. You learn a lot more about people through a conversation. You can hear, their tones, their underlying emotions, if they get really excited about things, asking recruits about what moments or experiences they're most proud of and seeing where they take the conversation. I really enjoyed that aspect of recruiting because at the end of the day, all of us college coaches, we're all going to go after the top kids, right? We're all going to go after the fastest ergs that we think could, influence our program. But what I need to do as a coach is find the athletes that I want to work with that I think I can support. Right. And I think as the recruit on the other side, right, my advice to them is, yeah, you're going to talk to a bunch of coaches, right? And we're all going to be able to offer you coaching in a boat, but it's going to come down to who do you feel like can help you achieve your goals for your college career. So coming back to it again, it starts with a simple conversation. Who's doing a good job? As a recruit, I would hope that people are paying attention to how do you exist in a conversation, right? And from there, it can then grow, right? We'll continue to track calls, and both my staff and I will continue to follow up with coaches. We'll continue to follow up with athletes. But I think that very basic question really opens the door for further conversation. So who's doing a good job?
Yeah, no, I like that. And my follow up to that, you kind of alluded to it to a degree, but a follow up to that is like you reference, okay, like you are able to use, leverage the relationships that you've been able to develop in your long time as being in this space, being in the rowing world. What would you say for the athletes who maybe are, aren't part of a program that you have that direct connection with? Like, what would be their way to maybe wiggle their way through into the inbox of Coach Lane as you, right? Like, what would that process look like for them? What would your advice be? You referenced, the recruiting profiles, but also, probably direct contact with you. Like, talk about that, where it's like the athlete who maybe doesn't have that direct tie to the connection that you have from, coaching connection. How can they make themselves known to you as kind of that first step in the recruiting process?
I think it's important for an athlete to stick to what feels natural to them, right? So if their preferred medium is texting, right? Certainly my number's all over the place. Not that I receive a lot of cold texts, but I think that that's one way. But if you're somebody who is more of a visual person, I think how people are starting to use Instagram and using social media to highlight different things, right? I was looking at Instagram yesterday, and there was somebody that had posted of, oh, look at this, like my second PR, right? And it was somebody that had just posted something or like just created their account, right? That caught my eye. So if that's something that's a visual, right, that's not that recruit, putting that in an email of like, hey, I just PR'd on my second 2K that I ever did. That's something that I saw in an image on Instagram. So I think that that's one way. If you're somebody that is more, say, organized, right, I think resources like NCSA, and I think that that's pretty much the main one that still exists right now because everybody else is merged. But I think to be able to exist in a space like that where, hey, you're putting your name out there. So yeah, if it came to be that I was looking at race results, I could cross-check that. I find your profile. I think that that's another way. But I think at the very end of the day, if somebody fills out a recruiting questionnaire, certainly I have access to it. My staff gets access to it. And we can go from there because we get a ding in our inbox whenever we get a questionnaire in. So I think for recruits out there that, may not have that same connection where I can call up their coach, right? Because while I like to think I know a lot of coaches, I certainly don't know everybody. And I don't think anybody really does. I think for recruits to go on and just find the prospective athlete questionnaires and be truthful in how you fill it out, right? When there's a question asked there of like, why do you want to row for this school? Be truthful about it. Anybody can say like, oh, I want a competitive team, but I think the ones that stand out to me are the ones that can give me a little bit more information to show that you are invested in the school. I think for Drexel, it's easy because it's like, I'm really attracted to the co-op opportunity. I think finding out how you want to exist. Social media is not for everybody. I think that's been a great resource. I think using things like NCSA, that's a great resource. It doesn't have to be for everybody, but I think either sending emails, all coaches' emails and coaches' contacts are online, or filling out prospective athlete questionnaires. I think those are probably the main ways to start to feed into that relationship.
And would you say most of your contact, like most of your communication with athletes, would you say that is more, because one of the things I always tell athletes is like, hey, like, don't wait to be found, make yourself seen, where it's like, if you are doing your initial education on the landscape that is college rowing, like what is out there, right? Am I interested in Northeast or, somewhere else in the country? Do I want big city school or somewhere like a college town? Like, if you're an athlete who is doing your own research, it's like, hey, don't necessarily wait for yourself to be found by coaches at the university that you're genuinely interested in. Make yourself seen by communicating in the, and that's a great point. Like I always personally recommend that they do email, because probably I'm the one who, that's the way that I'm most receptive, because I'm looking at it, it's in front of my computer. Text messages get lost in, quite a few of, current team, athlete, family, so on and so forth, text messages. So it's like, that's the medium that I work well with. But some of coaches might be Instagram, right? Like I asked you to come on this podcast via DM on Instagram, right? Like, so there's ways to be able to communicate, but at the very least, you want to make yourself feel or be seen, right? And I think one of my follow-ups for you, or I guess a two-part question, right? Like, so it sounds like you're receiving a lot of questionnaires, emails, DMs, text messages, so on and so forth. Also with that, like geographically for you, right? We have this hub that is Philadelphia Rowing. But does that extend beyond just here in Center City or here in the Philadelphia community where there are dozens upon dozens of rowing programs within a X mile radius? But also, does that extend to other parts of the country? What does that look like for you guys, for you personally? Like, where are you investing your time?
I mean, I think it's a good point. It really is going to depend on where the right people are, right? I think just as you said, we're fortunate in that we have a pretty big rowing hub here within the immediate 2 hours. So I'm going to loop New Jersey in, I'm going to loop Delaware in, even like New York a little bit, right? We're very fortunate that we have a hub here, just like Boston has a hub, right? The Northeast, right? And looking at West Coast, right? You've got Seattle, you've got San Francisco, right? So there's all these hubs all over the place. I think certainly we play into the hub a lot for recruiting because, I don't need to go across the globe to find talent that's in my backyard. But at the same time, if there is talent that's across the globe, whether it's, domestically in the country or whether it's internationally, I'm certainly going to set my sights pretty wide. I want to be able to see what people are doing. I think just because we may have a program that we attract a lot of kids from a year-to-year basis doesn't mean that will always be the program that we attract kids to, or kids from, excuse me. I think for us, because we have such a unique opportunity with the co-op education, with the co-op curriculum, there's not that many schools that offer that. I'm able to take that and really push our messaging to different parts, right? And whether or not that results in, a handful of athletes from California, who's to say? But I think certainly the pipeline around Philadelphia helps us, but I think the school curriculum and the academics allow us to have meaningful conversation outside of that radius.
Yeah, and I think that's like, again, because I didn't row in high school. I started rowing when I got to St. Joe's, and then obviously I coached at St. Joe's. But the number of rowing programs that exist that I knew nothing about until I really became a coach, because when you're in college, you're not really thinking about where you were in high school. Like it just in this circle of, X number of miles, 50 miles, whatever, like the number of programs out there, and at different tiers of, experience of that program, right? Or what the investment is in those programs. Like it's very easy to really narrow that focus there, and then also be able to branch out, once you've established kind of a good perimeter of like, oh, like we have a lot of talent here in our backyard, as you said. I really like the way you phrased that. And then with that, like, as we turn to the other side of the table, right? Like you have experience, as in the college rowing world for, a number of different programs, a number of different experience levels, right? Like different roles, so on and so forth. On the other side of the table, for the athletes that you're talking to, or not even you as a coach at Drexel, but any coach out there, let's actually flip it to, okay, like those athletes, where should they begin in your eyes in terms of, okay, in women's rowing especially, you have Division 1, you have Division 3, you have, the club, you have D2, right? All these different things. You have different tiers within each of those different divisions, right? But especially Division 1.
Mhm.
Where do you feel athletes should begin when navigating that process as a sophomore, junior in high school? Like where, and it may be related to, okay, the rowing programs themselves, but also the schools geographically, class size, like whatever it may be, like how can they sift through that clutter that is so many options in order to actually be able
Mhm.
to initiate communication with coaches?
Mhm. Well, Kevin, I'm gonna little educational opportunity for you, right? One of the things I use in my coaching on a day to day is I've actually eliminated the word should from my vocabulary, right? Because to me, should in any, not even coaching, but just a day to day, right? If you use the word should, right, it's usually going to be a need or a want, like 99.9% of the time, right? So for you, and just saying like, where should somebody start? I think the question is, A, where do they want to start, or where do they need to start, right? I think for athletes that are just getting started, right, that want to, go down this route of rowing in college, I think that they can really start anywhere. But for them, they're going to need to start to identify what they want out of a program and what they want out of an experience. If I'm somebody that wants to row on the junior national team, or excuse me, not junior national team, like say that I had junior national team experience and I want to further my sights on U23s or possibly even like the pathway up to the senior team, right? I'm going to start to identify schools that, have probably a significant background and history of athletes going in that way, right? You take a look at the Ivy League level. I think we see a lot of people go through the various Ivy Leagues to be able to use that as a gateway into U23s. Certainly a lot of the top programs. But if I'm somebody that is very competitive in high school, recognizing that I really want to prioritize academics. Not that every student can't prioritize academics, because that's what we're always a student
Yeah.
athlete. Let's not forget about that. But I think if for me, I just want to be able to be competitive and continue to compete, right? I have to consider what that looks like, right? So if I want to be, I use this all the time, but if I want to be selfish in my own career, if I want to make my mark, I want to do something that hasn't been done for the program before. I might look at a program that's on the up and up, right? That may be on the surface and that precipice of bursting into that next level. Or if I just want to be able to compete, maybe I just continue to go to a program that has seen success at, a certain point. But I think wherever an athlete, or how an athlete starts, is to be able to identify what they want out of that experience. For some people, it is just finding, a team that they can continue to work hard, that they can work towards something, they can be a part of something bigger than themselves. I think there's plenty of opportunities there. But as you get a little bit more niche and a little bit more specific, say that it's, finding the most elite competition possible, like the upper echelon, that's going to require a little bit more research to feel what program is going to be right for you. But I think when it comes to D1, D2, D3, right, it's not even saying like, okay, I want to row D1 in college. It's okay, what's going to give me that environment where I can succeed, right? We've seen people from Division 3 make the national teams, right? We've seen people from smaller programs, right, that maybe not have won NCAAs that have gone on to that. So I would caution people not to limit their sights just based on what they think they need to do. It's what you want out of your experience.
Yeah. And I think,
That's my hot take on it.
yeah, no, I love that. And I think, like, cause again, like there's so many different programs out there, right? Like 90 plus just on the Division 1 level. Then you have all these other different options
Mm-hmm.
at different divisions. And like you said, like, there's just different, like, there's the schools that perennially kind of compete at that NCAA grand final level, and they are sending kids to, the U23s and so on and so forth, whatever it may be, right? Like, but also, there's the other piece of a school like Drexel that has a co-op program, right? And the academic front, which I kind of want to get into as well. It's like, okay, like
Mm-hmm.
there's the rowing piece, right? Where do you see yourself from a rowing standpoint? But then, as you alluded to, right, we are student athletes first, and you want to find the place that is the right fit for you,
Mm-hmm.
both on and off the water, right? Academically, athletically, and personally, right? Like, what about in terms of just that conversation with themselves, right? The other things that go
Mm-hmm.
along with rowing, where it's like, okay, like I want to go to, you know, obviously a school that has a co-op program or has very, you know, competitive engineering, you know,
Mm-hmm.
school, right? Or maybe I'm looking more for something along this line, right? Like in the sciences or something like that. Like maybe I want something that's in the city versus, you know, this, like, what about that process? Like, it's like, okay, like when you take away the rowing aspect,
Mm-hmm.
where else could they, or what are some other things that they should be asking themselves, but still in alignment with rowing, right? If you want to row, right, like then make
Mm-hmm.
it happen, right? But
Right.
also, how do you weigh in the other factors that go into a college decision?
Mm-hmm. Well, Kevin, I think you're hitting on a big point, right? Rowing is going to be one part of your life, right? And one thing, certainly as coaches that we all talk about to our recruits, I know that I'm not the only one, but if you didn't have rowing, would you still be happy here, right? We don't know what year to year is going to look like. We certainly don't go in planning on that anybody gets injured, but for those times that say that you do have a season-ending injury, you still want to be happy with your surroundings and comfortable and growing. Um, but I think, again, it comes back to the athlete, and it just comes back to the student, right? What type of environment suits them, right? Do they want a big school? Do they want, the school spirit? Do they want to be close to a city where they can get off campus and they can explore a little bit, right? I know for Drexel, one of our big selling points is that Philly is a very walkable city, right? You can walk into different neighborhoods, right? You can go to a sports game like just a little while away, right? Big plug, and go Eagles, go Phillies right now, right? Um, but I think to look at the environment, right? How do you learn, right? Are you somebody that is more of a visual learner? Do you like that idea of having smaller classes, to having a smaller teacher to student ratio? Um, do you want somewhere that has a study abroad program if that's important to you? Um, I think we I think we take a look at college and we start to manufacture this like grandiose idea where it's like, oh my God, it's going to be so stressful. We need to do this, this, and this. And if we don't do all of these things, then, it's all going to be a waste. I think for a student who is of that sophomore, junior era, or like even a freshman, if they're just that, much of a future planner, what do you like to do and what do you need to do, right? If you're somebody that needs a little bit of extra help in the classroom, you want to make sure that you're picking somewhere that has the resources to be able to support you. If there is a certain major, right, narrow your search and don't try and find the major at other places if you can look it up and see that this school doesn't provide what you're looking for, right? I think it's just identifying, what they want out of this 4-year experience, just kind of like anything. What do you want out of going on vacation? What do you want to get out of that experience, regardless of whether or not your parents are dragging you on it, right? There is some sort of thought that goes into it and that perception of what do I want to get out of this experience. I think that college is just very similar. I think what gets tricky is that when people just follow or get in the habit of following the name or the reputation without understanding of what it means to them. I think that that's one of the biggest mistakes that I see in recruiting is that people think that, okay, just because I go to this school, like then everything's going to be fine. And, in reality, that school may not be the right fit for them. It may be too big of a school. We may not like a city campus. So as students go through this, it's almost like you want to build in a little bit of grace for yourself to say, okay, why do I want this? Not just because somebody says that, I should go here, right? There it is, right? Like if somebody's using the word should, challenge to everybody out there, right? Figure out if it's a need or a want. So I think it just comes down to being very thoughtful with how you look at things, right? It's their own experience. Every single individual's experience is different. Just like my experience, while it could be comparable to yours, right? We were both walk-on rowers in college. Like it was still very different.
One of the things, like with athletes, it's like, okay, like external motivations, right? They have these external
Mm-hmm.
motivations. It might be in terms of just the brand name, might be the academic program, it might be the chances or the opportunities financially, right? Scholarship opportunities, so on and so
Mm-hmm.
forth. Like those are, in many ways, like those external motivations that they're chasing versus
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, like this school is the right fit for me in terms of just the personality of the school. I have a relationship that I really liked with the coaches, with the team, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would you say like are things that athletes can start to think about in terms of like or what would you say are examples of reasons that you feel like positions athletes when they do set foot on campus that makes them successful, right? Those motivations that do make them successful once they
Hmm.
do get on the college level versus those kinds of surface level external motivations. Like, unpack that for me. You alluded to it a little bit
Hmm.
in before.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's certainly a variety of reasons why people can be motivated to go to college or to row in college, right? I'm going to use only because it's relevant and it's recent. I'm going to use Justin Best as an example, right? Justin was a Drexel student, right? He came, rowed in Delaware, came to Drexel, was a very successful rower here. I've actually known Justin for a handful of years. I met him when he was a U.S. rowing intern. He'll probably kill me for saying this, but um, so I watched his rowing career really develop, and also him as a person, right? So he sought out these opportunities that were going to better himself. He knew that he wanted to be, in the rowing realm, in one capacity or another, but he talks all the time, and he's talked to our athletes about it, of how Drexel prepared him to take this big step in his career. So for most people, I think they know by now, like, Justin continued to work full time as he trained for the Olympics, right? And he talks all about the skill sets that he learned at Drexel, and how they set him up to do the same thing, right? He was rowing at Drexel, he was going to co-op, right? And so it became a very routine like thing that he's been doing for a handful of years now. So I think when it came to that, not, I don't want to speak directly for Justin, but right, he saw the motivation to, be a better student, right, to set him up for success, in the real working world outside of college, and it also set him up for success and to achieve his big rowing dreams. So I think when we think about external motivations, right, there's different motivations. Certainly, yeah, everybody sees, like, wow, when you're a part of a college team, right, you just get absolutely showered with gear, right? Nike Christmas everywhere. There's the idea that you are put in the spotlight at times within the university. You're kind of a little bit of like a celebrity, depending on the school that you're at. And I think there's also the motivation that if you're a student athlete, you're also um, privy to a lot more resources than the average student, because you're managing your time and you're trying to do two things at once. You're trying to see success in sport, and you're trying to see success in the classroom. So I think the resources that are provided, yeah, in my mind, they can be seen as a little bit of the next level, of academic support in some ways. And I think when it comes to motivation, like, people just have to be truthful in what they want to see and what they want to do. I think deciding on a program just because, it looks all bright and shiny, I don't know if that's the best motivation. But if you can see that program and say, wow, this is bright and shiny, and I know that I can see success here, right? The athletic department invests, resources into the program, and believes in me, right? I think that there's a variety of motivations that really is just going to depend on the person and what they're looking to get out of the experience. I think anybody can look at the college experience and say, okay, I want to set myself up to be a lawyer, right? I want to go to a school that has a pretty solid pre-law program, or a school that has a really good law school, that if I graduate and do undergrad, then that may lead to better chances of getting into law school. So I think it just depends on, where do you want to be when you're, it's kind of weird to say, like, where do you want to be when you're an adult? Most people, after they graduate from college, like, ideally will look to move out and they'll start their own life. Like, where do you want to be when your life really starts and you take full hold of it? I think you learn a lot of independence, and you are forced to be pretty independent in college, especially if you're not living at home. Like, if you're a commuter student, right, there's that. But at the end of your college experience, ideally, you're going to graduate with a degree, right? You're going to, for our sport at least, you're going to wrap up your experience in sport for the most part. But where do you want to be at that point? I think that there's schools that can set you up in better in certain capacities, but you just have to understand what those are and what those pathways are to get there.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it. Like, it's like when you are choosing a school and looking beyond just the rowing, it's like, okay, well, the rowing and some of the other factors that go into it, where it's like, okay, you have the rowing, but also the rowing in tandem with all these other factors that go in, right? You're passionate about
Mm-hmm.
the academic program, you're passionate about, or you're forward enough thinking where you're starting to put a little bit of, you're thinking a bit about what's beyond that rowing
Mm-hmm.
phase of your life, right? The professional side of things. So, kind of having the incorporating that into this decision-making process is probably pretty important for athletes. Now with that, like, as we look at on campus or on, in the room, in the boathouse, in the erg room, whatever it may be, for college athletes, again, in your experience and both at Drexel and all the other programs that you've been a part of in this journey as a coach, what do you feel like are some things that make that athletes, some characteristics, intangibles, tangibles, whatever it may be, right? Personal, physical, whatever it may be, like, what do you feel like are some things that help position athletes for success once they are on campus, right? They're walking in the door. These are things that athletes can begin to, especially probably your freshmen who are a couple weeks into their first year as Division I athletes. What are some things that they can begin to think about to help better position them for 4 years of success at the college level? What are some things that high school athletes can begin to think about that will help them be successful? And successful is a relative term. You can kind of, take that whatever direction you want, but will help them be successful at the college level. Go, give me some of your thoughts in terms of just that, like what positions these athletes for success.
Ooh, what positions these athletes for success? I think I've got to go with my gut and saying effective communication. I think communication skills are a big one. I know my coaching philosophy is based.
That's a good start. Yeah,
you like that one?
Yeah, that one's rarely. That's a big one.
My coaching philosophy is based on effective communication. And when I think about that, there's a lot of different relationships that exist within a team, and you can broaden that to say, that exist in life, right? And to understand how each relationship can help you grow, right, I think is really important. But it's not even how each relationship can help you grow. It's how do you converse? How do you communicate with these varying type of relationships? Certainly there's going to be basic levels of communication skills of, I just like very, I don't even want to, I just open it up, but there's very basic levels of communication where you're engaging with somebody else, right? But if it comes to a teammate, right, who's sitting in the boat with you, right, that's going to be a little bit of a different type of interaction that you're going to have to communicate with, right? We've all been in boats where, you have the person that talks a lot, right? That it's like, oh my God, the set's off. Oh my God, the rush is so bad. But in that instance, how are we using our words to put into action to better our experience, right? So when I think about skill sets that athletes can have both at the junior and the collegiate level, right, it's putting a lot of focus in on your messaging, right? Words matter. And, the influence that you can have because of your words, the impact that you can have on another person because of your words, that's a life skill. So for me, I want to put a lot of emphasis on helping athletes communicate better, helping students communicate better, helping people communicate better. And it's not even better, but more effectively, right? When I think of an effective conversation between a coach and an athlete, right, that athlete has, concerns, what do I need to do to get better? And how are they asking the coach for feedback, right? How are they asking the coach for advice? And how is that coach providing the feedback to a point where that specific athlete understands, comprehends, and can put into action that feedback, right? So the relationship between a coach and an athlete, in my mind, is different than a relationship between an athlete and coach. And so to be able to understand how you converse those and how you can use your words to convey what you're feeling, convey what you're thinking, right? That's going to be the biggest life skill of them all. Not even college students or, high school students. That's just life. So how that continues to play out, right? Then you can talk about things of, the influence that you can have on other people, the impact that you can have on other people. I think when an individual can start to really conceptualize and recognize how much of an influence they can have on others and how many people they influence, I think that's where we start to see a lot of growth. I read a study earlier this week, right, that the average person will influence over 80,000 people in their lifetime, right? So if we can start to do the work now, or even at a young age, where we help these individuals really understand and think about the influence that they can have on other people, right? If you're passing somebody in a busy city, right, and you're walking into a building, right, can you hold the door behind you and just wait for them to say thank you? Or can you be the one saying thank you for somebody holding the door, right? That's an influence. So I think when it comes to characteristics and like and skill sets that people can have, I think the power of communication is the biggest one, right? We see that play out in how you work as a team, how you negotiate, conversations, how you manage conflict. I mean, it just shows up everywhere. I think the other big skill set that I would encourage individuals to think about, both high school and college level, is it's not of understanding how hard or knowing how hard you want to work. It's understanding what you can sacrifice, right? What are you willing to sacrifice to be able to get what you want, right? Is it that you were sacrificing tickets to go see your favorite artist, right? The night before a big race, right? Like that you've been wanting to see, and maybe they rescheduled the tour, right? Are you sacrificing that to be able to be at your maximum performance the next day? Are you sacrificing, or are you willing to sacrifice I don't know. I look at how some of the elite athletes train right now. Are you willing to sacrifice being in a temporary housing situation for 3 months while you're training in Colorado or training out in California? Right? We all have these sacrifices that we make, and instead of understanding like how hard are you willing to work, it's understanding the sacrifices that you're willing to make or the compromises that you're willing to have. So I think communication, sacrifices, and then the ability, along with sacrifices, being able to recognize your priorities, right? I talk with my staff all the time, and shout out to my assistant coach, Carson Healy, and she adopted this from her experience from her college program. But we talk about there's 5 priorities, right? There's family, friends, school, rowing, and I think fun. And at any one point, one of those will be a priority, right? And it's understanding, when is it the appropriate time to make each one of those a priority. If you're home for Christmas break, right, you're away from school, right, classes aren't the priority, right? You're spending time with your family, great, family's the priority, right? If you're in the middle of it and you're the thick of exams, right, but you also have a 2K test, something has to give, right? And understanding that, one test is not going to make or break it, right? But you have to understand in that moment what the priorities are. So I think those are going to be my 3 big things. Communication skills are like unbelievably important. I think the ability to understand what you're willing to sacrifice. And I think on that same level, what you're willing to prioritize in that given moment.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, even just with sacrifice and priority, but even just before all that, like what you alluded to with communication, I think is just one of the most like as a coach, it's like, and talking to high school athletes consistently, talking to college athletes when I was coaching at the college level, professional life, whatever it may be, like the ability to communicate and get your message across in a way that is, received by whoever is on the other side of that, like that's an important quality. But even then, like just the importance of just staying on top of communication, where it's like athletes communicating with the coaches, communicating with their teammates, and not just assuming, that the coach is going to know this about them, or, their teammates are going to know. Like, I think those are incredibly valuable qualities that are also tangible now, or they can do now while in high school, where it's like, okay, like practicing actually having a conversation with your high school coach about, that back, tightness that you've been experiencing after every row, and why, maybe you feel like it's could be a detriment to future rowing, like whatever it may be, like learning how to have those uncomfortable conversations as a high school athlete through proactive communication, right? Staying on top of it and actually being able to have those conversations. I think, again, like, I think that's one of the, I'm really happy that you said that, because high school athletes can begin to incorporate those skills now. And not only is it going to help them in their rowing career, it's going to help them in their career beyond for the rest of their life, just learning how to communicate properly. So I really love that. And question that kind of like, as I listen to you and your breakdown of different things, and the questions that I asked, like, or in the questions that I asked, like, my question for you is, you have experience with rowing, or, in a bunch of different areas of the rowing world.
Mm-hmm.
Not just as a college coach, but different depths of coaching, different arenas that fall within the rowing world. What what attracts you to coaching? And the reason I ask is
Mm-hmm.
obviously you have experience with, again, in the corporate world, but around rowing, you have experience in the coaching world, but, and probably like you have a very uh, diverse experience all in the rowing
Mm-hmm.
world. You also have your, uh, you know, uh, what was it, an MBA or a graduate degree in, right,
Mm-hmm. Masters.
right, master's in whatever you mentioned before, right?
Marketing.
Like
Yeah.
marketing, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
what attracts you with all these skills that you have at your disposal? What attracts you to
Mm-hmm.
coaching and being able to almost cast those skills upon this field,
Mm-hmm.
right? Rowing, right? Coaching at the Division 1 varsity level. Like what brings you to it?
That's a good question. I think what brings me to coaching is I want to be able to open the doors for individuals that might not have recognized there's a door there to begin with. And I think what that means is I think sport is not even, I think, I know that sport is one of the biggest tools for character development, right? The fact that you can learn life skills through sport, right, while enjoying it, while certainly there's health benefits, but I think what immediately drew me to coaching was that it just helped me grow as a person, and I wanted to be able to give that back and pay that forward to somebody else, right? um, every individual's journey is different, right? And I think that that's what keeps this job both exciting, and it keeps this job ever changing and ever evolving, right? Every individual that walks through my door, yeah, there's certainly a lot of similarities, but there's also so many different differences, and it's up to me, right, being the competitive person and being the strategist, right, to figure out how can I connect with that person, connect with that athlete to be able to push them harder, right? And for them to be able to seize their goals, meet their goals, right? Seize the opportunity, whatever it may be. But I'm really drawn to the process, right? And if we can say, okay, the start of your first year with me, here's where you are, X, Y, and Z. These are the goals that you set out in your first individual meeting with me. Where are you 4 years ago? I think that conversation that I have with seniors, or, at the end of the year, to say like, wait, remember where you started? Like you were this little timid person and now you're an absolute beast on the water, right? How did we get here? And I think that those conversations where somebody can say of, great, this is where I was, this is what I learned about myself through rowing, right? It's not even about my influence, but if I can help create that environment for them to grow and for individuals to take risks and provide that opportunity, that's what this job is all about, right? I know that I've had a lot of coaches in my time, in different sports, not just rowing, some that have been very influential on my career, and some that were influential in not great ways. And so I've been able to take my own experiences, reflect on them, and say, okay, how can I provide this opportunity for people moving forward? How can I take what I've learned through all these experiences, like regardless of whether it's a direct coach influence, but how can I create this wonderful environment where an athlete can fail, where an individual can fail and then rise again and be better for it? I think I'm very drawn to the process of the individual growth is why I coach. I just think that why not use sport in that arena, whether it's not even just rowing, but where you can use sport to test your limits, right? So you can figure out who you really are, who you want to be, and practice it. And then come out, a couple years later and just say, wow, like this helped me get to where I am today, right? Justin to be up on the platform and say, here's my gold medal. Like I worked this hard for, this is what I learned, right? And be able to share his experience with this next generation. Like it's things like that where it's not as immediate about it's not as, how do I want to say this? I'm losing my words. It's not the immediate moment that matters. It's what you can do in the long run, right? Coaching is a long game. Yeah. In the moment you can help somebody click, you can create a light bulb moment, right? You can open up a lot of possibility, but the overall long growth of an individual, I think that's why I'm drawn to the sport. I think it just creates good people. It's a vehicle. It's a medium. It's a community. it's a tool that we can certainly all take advantage of, and why not? And I feel why not use it? And I feel lucky to be somebody who's a driver of that.
And how do you feel like your skill sets, your backgrounds, again, like with your experience, in different arenas within rowing, how do you feel like that helps you do that or be a part of that process, but even better, right? Like, how do you take like those skills? Like, what do you feel like are your skills that you've been able to really prioritize and acquire? And the reason I ask is like, you do bring a lot into, or you do tie a lot of things into that social element, or that, just the human behavior element of, being a coach, or also the athlete development process. Like, how do you feel like, these skills that you've been able to acquire, these strengths that you feel like are some of your strengths,
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's the better way to say it. Like, what do you feel like are some of your
Mm-hmm.
strengths, and being able to help athletes through that process of whatever life has for them beyond just rowing, right? What do you feel like are some of your strengths that can help fuel them, that you've been able to gather from your past experiences?
I think I've been able to see the sport from so many different angles that it allows me to think about the quality of the experience. So, I've certainly been exposed to some really great rowing, whether it's riding along in coaching launches, coaching it, photographing it, talking about it. And I think for me, what it allows me to do is come back to my own team and say, okay, how can we boost the quality of this experience, right? You're getting up to row. Everybody knows, great. You get an oar, you put the oar in, you sit down, you get in a boat, and you go take some strokes, right? But how can we make this experience, how can we make each moment worthwhile, fulfilling, and influential? I think within all of my different experiences and all my different perspectives, like I've been very fortunate to see it from so many different angles, right? To be able to sit up at the starting line platform at World Rowing Championships and be a photographer and watch how different athletes go through rituals at the starting line. I think that that's so different than watching athletes interact with each other on like in the boatyards at different places, or sitting down to talk to former national team coaches about how they learned to coach. I think everything has really been informative in my own experience to be able to come back and deliver and create a unique experience for the athletes that I coach today. And I think that that's been the way the entire coaching career, whether it was my first, coaching job, at a Division III school in Boston, where we went from club to varsity. I think that I was really focused in on creating the best experience and creating these moments that hopefully athletes will still remember today. I think that same approach, 10, 12 years ago is now what's still very much present in my coaching style today.
Yeah, no, I love that. And again, like it's the different lenses that you've been able to see the sport, I think is quite unique. And it's like a lot of us are only like the coaching is kind of the lens that we've seen all of our experiences through. We're athlete then coach, right? You've had a bunch of different perspectives, and to see how that kind of has shaped your own coaching style. And then now as you bring it to your athletes and helping them, realize success, now at the college level. So, couple more questions as we kind of wrap up. I want to give you an opportunity, like, tell me a little bit about, like, okay, you are here in racing season. Our racing season is right on the horizon, right? Talk to me a little bit about just the Drexel program, like, the co-op program, the school itself. Like, tell me a little bit about like what attracted you to being in Philadelphia again, but also specifically Drexel and the uniqueness of the school, the rowing program, the community. As we kind of wrap things up here, and I let you get on with the rest of race week here, but talk to me a little bit about what attracted you to your current position now.
That's an easy one. What attracted me to Drexel was the fact that I saw and could draw so many parallels between my coaching philosophy, the coach that I wanted to be, and what the school was able to provide, right? Drexel's whole basis is driven off of experiential education, right? So on the academic side, it's putting the kids in the classroom, putting the students in the classroom for a set amount of time, and then saying, okay, now it's time to take what you learned in the classroom and apply it to real life scenarios, right? So I think for me, that parallels and complements my coaching style, the way that I look to run my program, my coaching philosophy really well. I want it to be a collaborative environment. I want it to be an environment where we're constantly learning and we're not just repeating, what the textbook says. Like, I want it to be different. I want to try new things. And I think the type of student that Drexel attracts is one that I want to work with, and one that I think can ultimately help us grow as a program. So with the co-op, it is unique, right? We're on the quarter system, and I think we're one of like maybe 5 schools nationwide that are still in the quarter system. Our 2 main popular programs at Drexel are either a 4-year 1 co-op, or a 5-year 3 co-op. We try and encourage athletes and students to take advantage of the 5-year 3 co-op, which means that for close to about a year and a half of your experience in college, you'll be in the working realm, right? You'll be holding a job, working with a company, and not just a paper pusher type of internship role. You're actually getting real life experience. So I think that it's really easy to make that sell in today's day and age, where we're constantly berated by statistics of financial debt or the unemployment rate. I think coming to a school like Drexel, where this is already built into your curriculum, is a win-win situation. I think the experience that our students get out of the co-op, right? They usually have 2 or 3 different co-ops. They're learning what they want in a job. They're learning what they're excited about. They're learning maybe a different area or specific field of study that they want to go into. So there's a lot of exploration that happens. And I think Drexel does a really nice job of being able to support the student on its journey. The quarter system, what that looks like is we start a little bit later. They're concentrated blocks, so our athletes take roughly about 4 classes at once, and then they go into co-op, and sometimes they'll continue to take a class or 2 on the side. But then when they're in co-op, it's a true 9 to 5 working day. For the most part, for our athletes, we have our athletes on a spring-summer co-op, which means that in the fall they're in classes. The winter season, which technically starts like before people leave for winter break, so that winter term, they're in classes, and then towards the end of the spring quarter, right around, I believe it's the end of March, they'll start interviewing for co-ops, and then they'll start their co-op. I think it's the end of April, and carry that through April, May, June, July, into the summer. So what's interesting about the co-op is that it's not, again, just an internship that you can get unpaid during the side in the summer. It's a full-time working experience. You're getting paid for it. On average, our co-ops are making, people on co-op are making anywhere from $19,000 to $22,000 per co-op. So it helps ease the cost of financial burden, financial debt on the family or on the individual. So that, to me, I feel really good about it. Especially knowing that I am a city school with a pretty decent price tag. But at the end of their experience, right, whether it's 4 years or whether it's 5 years, they're not coming away just with a degree, right? They're coming away with connections that they can use to network and find a job. But more often than not, they're coming away with a job offer that they can start right away. And they're not just getting the entry-level positions, they're usually getting the one above, because now they're coming to the table with a year and a half working experience to say, like, okay, I'm kind of past entry level, let me go for the associate's level. So I think Drexel just does a really nice job in preparing the student for life after college. And I think it takes a unique student or a different type of student to be able to really, again, I've used the word conceptualize a lot, but visualize where they want their life after college to be. But the people at Drexel, like, they're really starting to think about it a lot earlier than their peers at other cohorts, or peers in their cohorts at other universities. So to me, it was easy, right? I think, certainly I could have gone on to work in a handful of different programs. By the time when I took this job, I did have a handful of competitive opportunities that, for some of them, they were pretty hard to turn down. But for me, being back in Philly, in a city where I could really get behind, that I'm excited to be a part of on a personal level, and to be a place like Drexel where I really do feel like the emphasis is on the preparation for the real world, like, that was a pretty big no-brainer for me. And to be back on Boathouse Row, of course.
There you go. Yep. No, it's and man, we could have a whole nother podcast on the co-op stuff and like just not even just like obviously the co-op is a unique opportunity that Drexel provides, but even more specifically, like when you talk about, you've alluded to it before, but I could, go, very deep and, or it could be a very interesting conversation for later, for another podcast eventually, but it's like just how that makes the value of that degree different than say, the traditional process of going through like, where you have an internship and maybe it's junior year and then the entry level, like you have real experiential, as I wrote down, experiential education, like incorporated into that, the entirety of your education, right? Like, it's just a unique opportunity. I think it really is, could be a fun topic, right? But anyway, with that, Katie, as we wrap up, my last question for you is just advice for as we put ourselves on the other side of the table where you are just speaking, in a loudspeaker to a bunch of aspiring college rowers who want to be best positioned for success at the college level, to go there and have the experience that, whether that is competitive experience and they want to win a bunch of races, or just they want to be on a great team and a great culture with a great coach. Like, very broad question, but maybe wrap up with this, just general advice for athletes who do aspire to row at the college level. What would be your advice to those athletes as you, again, like talk to just whatever path they decide to pursue? Like, what would your advice be to those athletes?
Stick with your gut, right? And be curious enough to ask questions. I think curiosity, wherever you go, whether it's school, whether it's rowing, right? You want to be curious enough to ask questions so you can better understand what you actually want. I think when we see all of the things all over the place of transfers and this and that, or, things not working out, or we hear the stories of somebody withdrew, to me, my immediate thought is that somebody didn't ask all of the questions that they needed to for that moment. So whether it's, you're filling out the questionnaires or whether or not you're just getting started, right? I liked what you had said earlier, Kevin, of like, don't wait, right? Don't wait for somebody to find you, whether that's a rower, whether you're a student, right? Don't wait for somebody to give you the opportunity to ask questions, ask them, right? The worst that anybody's going to say is no. And at the end of it, the best that anybody's going to do is that they're going to give you advice that you're actually going to use moving forward. So I think it's just stick to your gut. It'll tell you a lot, and be curious enough to ask questions.
I love that. As a great way to wrap things up, Kate. That was awesome. Any as we to kind of close things out, but I love that. Like, just ask questions, and your point to when people often find themselves maybe in a situation that they are second guessing, it might be somewhere in that question asking process. Did they ask the right questions leading up to that, where they could get a little bit more information that could maybe, influence that trajectory in some way. So love that. That's a great piece of advice for athletes out there who are listening. Last thing, anything that we can do to for athletes who are interested in Drexel and what you have going on there, who want to communicate with you, like any way that we can support you, following Drexel on social media, obviously, but like any last things that we can do to help you, and then we'll close things out there, and I'll be seeing you on the river probably as soon as, tomorrow morning, because I think I'm wrong. I'll probably see Drexel launching, but anything that we can do to help you.
No, I think if everybody can just continue to help the sport, right, it'll make all of our experiences that much worthwhile. Certainly we're one team, and as you said, there's multiple teams out there at varying levels. And I think just to see our sport continue on and continue to open doors for other people, don't be afraid to pay it forward. And I don't really need anything. I think the sport just continues to need all of our help.
Love that. Katie, thank you so much for coming on. This was a blast. I definitely think we can probably do another one at a later date and dive into some even more fun topics. But no, this was a blast. You have a great wealth of information and perspective that I think offers a lot of value to athletes who are listening. Good luck as you get ready for racing season. I will be tuning in as your first race is right down the road. But again, good luck as you guys kick off the fall, and looking forward to following Drexel as you guys move throughout the season. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Kevin. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and chat with you.
Absolutely. We'll do it again. Good luck.